Eek. Hi, and welcome to the YA ThrillerCon 2022 interview with Kat Ellis. So my name's Andreina Cordani. I'm the author of Dead Lucky and The Girl Who, and I'm here to talk to the amazing Kat Ellis, who is the author of some of the creepiest, most brilliant books that I've read so far. She's the author of Harrow Lake and Big Little Deeds. So, Kat, can you start off by telling me a little bit about yourself and your latest book?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you very much for that. It's always nice to be called creepy. I'm Kat Ellis. As you said, I'm the author of Wicked Little Deeds and Harrow Lake and a couple of other books a few years ago. I'll tell you a bit about Wicked Little Deeds, which is my most recent one, or Burden Falls as it was known in the US, and it had a very lovely cover over there as well. So that tells the story of Ava, who is a young girl who gets tangled up in a series of murders happening in her small, creepy town. And when her school nemesis is one of the murder victims, the police start looking at her as a suspect. But there are rumours around town that it's the ghost of Dead-Eyed Sadie, the local ghost who haunts the waterfall, that's behind it. And with all the creepy things that happen to Ava, she starts to question whether that might actually be true. Bless you.
I have to apologise. That slightly took away from the creepiness, because it is a very, very scary book. I mean, it's very scary. It's very pacey. It's kind of part thriller, part horror, isn't it?
It does sort of skirt that line.
elements of both, but that's actually kind of what I like, because I like this whole, with a thriller, the supernatural isn't real. With a horror, the supernatural often is. And so with Wicked Little Deeds, you just don't know. And I think that's part of the appeal, you're wondering all the way through, is it going to turn out to be real or not? And I felt the same way with Harrow Lake as well. So where did the idea come from for Wicked Little Deeds / Burden Falls?
Well, for Wicked Little Deeds in particular, the first seed of the idea that I had for it, and I tend to start with location, the setting for the story, before anything else comes to me. I was out walking, as I tend to do quite a lot in North Wales, where I am looking for spooky locations and anything that's a little bit creepy, like cemeteries, ruined castles, all that sort of business. But I was walking past a waterfall near where I live, Dizeth Waterfalls, and I thought it would be really cool if there was like a curse attached to it or something like that. And then I started to think, well, what could I do with that in a story? So yeah, that's where the first seed of the idea came from. So even though it's not set in North Wales, I sort of transplant some geographical stuff that I pick up along my travels and just put them into my books.
Yeah. So you kind of do you go around with like a creepy radar on your head, looking for things, unnerving things to add in, like ingredients in a potion?
Absolutely, yeah. I've always I take a lot of pictures of everything anyway. As anybody who follows me on Instagram will know, that I'm always taking pictures of creepy stuff when I'm out and about. But yeah, I think I love a good, interesting story. So anywhere that I can find that when I'm out and about, reading epitaphs on gravestones and things like that just get the wheels turning in my head.
Yeah, definitely. So you said about like the setting is always the thing that kicks off your books. So that makes me feel that the setting is kind of really important to you, and that really comes through in Harrow Lake and in Wicked Little Deeds. The setting is like another character in the book. So how do you sort of go about constructing that and making it it's got to tread the line between being creepy and being plausible in the modern world? So what sort of tools do you use to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that I do tend to treat the setting as an extra character. And I always think to myself, as I'm writing and afterwards when I'm editing as well, could this story have happened just anywhere, or is it specific to this location? And I always try and make it so that my stories couldn't possibly happen in any other location other than the setting that I've created for them, because the setting has to work with the plot, work with the characters, influence who the main character is. And I think all of those ingredients have to kind of come together. So I'm always thinking as I'm writing, when I'm writing a very creepy book, not all of my books have been that creepy. A bit, but they get worse. So as I'm revising, especially, I'm looking at scenes that I've written in the book and thinking, okay, what about this scene could be creepier? And sometimes that's the actions that the characters are taking. But a lot of the time, the creep factor that a reader will be picking up on is coming from the setting, the surroundings, and what the character is experiencing themselves. So that tends to be I'm looking at as a writer, and sort of trying to put myself in the seat of the reader as well while I'm doing that.
Yeah, because one little trick you did with Harrow Lake, which freaked me out. I don't know why. It's a little bit like, in Die Hard when the main character has no shoes on for the entire movie, and that really bothered me. And it's when you had Lola having to wear her mother's old clothes from the movie. Just, for people who don't know Harrow Lake, it's about the daughter of a famous director whose mother was an actress, and she's forced to go back to her hometown and live with her grandmother for a while. And the wardrobe's full of her mother's clothes that she wore in this iconic movie, and she's having to wear them because her luggage has gone missing and we don't know where it is. That bothered the hell out of me throughout. And just the idea of it being itchy and uncomfortable, and, I felt as uncomfortable as she probably did.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I made it worse and worse with each revision. It ends up at the point, because she ends up having to wear her mum's clothes because her suitcase mysteriously goes missing when she arrives in Harrow Lake. So she is basically forced into her mother's clothing, but she also has no underwear. So she's wearing her mum's dresses from this film, and she has no underwear. So even her most private clothing isn't her own. So, it's, Lola, she's a very isolated character, and she kind of sort of starts learning things about herself when she goes to Harrow Lake. And that was kind of part of her journey, I suppose, is that she doesn't even get to keep her own clothes. She has her identity stripped away from her to the point where she can't even wear her own clothing. So that was, I'm glad that made you uncomfortable, because it was meant to.
Yes. Thank you for making me uncomfortable.
You're welcome.
No, it was. So I was going to ask, obviously you said there was a real place that inspired Burden Falls. Was there a real place that inspired Harrow Lake as well?
There isn't a specific place, but there are little geographic elements, like the Bone Tree. There is a castle near where I live. In the grounds of this castle, it has this old, dead, twisted tree, and it just looks like something that, you can imagine witches chanting around it and things like that. Yeah. So things like that, and the old mining caves that are in Harrow Lake. There are mining caves up on the hillside near where I live. So going exploring those is something that also made me think about Mr. Jitters and the monster that lives in Harrow Lake, and that sound, that's almost like chattering teeth where water's falling from the roof.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you get sort of more of a taste of it from different places rather than anything else. Yeah. I was going to ask, with Harrow Lake and more so with Wicked Little Deeds, we're sort of questioning how much we should believe in the supernatural. Ava obviously, has her doubts, and then kind of almost has to buy into it because the alternative is she's going to get arrested. How do you kind of where do you fall? Do you fall on the skeptic side or the open-minded side?
Do you know, I love that question. I am naturally very much a Scully. I'm a skeptical person, but I'm open to being convinced. So I'm like a hopeful skeptic. I go on ghost hunts and things like that. I've been on a few of those because I want to see, something supernatural. I want to be convinced that these things are real, but I haven't seen anything that's convinced me yet.
I think some people are actually more inclined to see ghosts than others. I've recently interviewed a woman who has probably, had about 5 or 6 different experiences with ghosts that she told me about, that all involved, mysterious noises and things floating and whatever. And some people just seem to be more receptive to that kind of thing. I think
I
if I
think
saw
I'm
something
probably like the opposite to that sort of person, like ghost repellent. So if anybody
yeah,
has, you know, if you have a haunted house and you want me to come and expel your ghosts for you, I could probably do that just by coming to stay for a couple of days.
so yeah, I mean, we should go and seek them out and become ghostbusters, clearly, because you know we just kill them with our skepticism. But
That
maybe
seems like the right
I
thing
mean,
to do.
maybe that's why you end up writing spooky stuff. Could it be?
Yeah, definitely. I've
Sending
always
the
been a big fan of like horror and scary books and films as well. Ever since I was a little child, far too young to be watching, you know, the horror that was coming out in the 80s.
yeah,
I mean, I get really, really invested in all kinds of genres and fandoms and stuff, not just horror, but horror seems to be something that I gravitate towards, and it seems to be something that when I'm writing, I'm always tending to think, okay, but what about if this was even weirder, or what if this was, you know, even scarier than what it is? So I think horror is my sort of happy place. That sounds so
Horror is
wrong, doesn't
nice.
it?
Is that like the title of your autobiography?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is your favourite horror trope?
Well, I'm quite a fan of the final girl trope. I've used that myself, obviously, particularly in Harrow Lake. That was that came into play. There were quite a few tropes that I used in Harrow Lake, or sort of like spun on their head. You know, never look underneath the bed. You know, never go upstairs, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think one of my favourites in a horror film is There's Something in the Walls. I think
Yeah.
that is, I kind of played with that a little bit in Harrow Lake, because there's a part where the wallpaper is peeling back and Lola sees like a creepy hand reaching out from underneath the wallpaper.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my take on that. But I've written short stories and things where there are, you know, noises in the walls, and the idea. Have you ever seen there was a film that came out, I forget what the title of it was, but it was about frogging with a PH. You know, where you live in somebody's house without them knowing. So you're like in the
Oh,
secret attic, or you're in the
yeah. I
basement.
didn't even know that was a word.
That's yeah, definitely a phenomenon that inspires me when I'm writing. I love things like that.
That is really creepy. And yeah, I have to apologise as well if you can hear any noise. There isn't something in the walls at my house. There's just people upstairs who are really crashing around. So I do apologise. So what films or what horror generally scared the pants off you when you were a kid?
I have to say, one that left a real lasting impression on me was a film called Ghoulies. I don't know if you remember that from the 80s. It was these horrible little creatures, and there were like several varieties of ghoulies, but this one particular scene where the slimy, horrible little ghoulie comes up the toilet while somebody's sitting on it. That terrified me as a kid, and I couldn't use the toilet at night for like a long time. Yeah, things like that. I watched Hellraiser when I was ridiculously small, and you know, the whole like hooks in the flesh scenes that they had in those films, which was just wrong to have been watching when I was like 5 or 6. But here we are writing horror. Surprise.
I was a massive coward when I was younger, but I do remember watching the first parts of Candyman with my sister, and then like I was supposed to be going out, and my sister was going to stay at home and watch the rest of it, and then she was like, "Actually, can I come with you?" So I've got really strong memories of that. But yeah, I was a massive coward. How scary for you? Like, how scary is too scary? First of all, for writing for YA, writing for your readers, and also for yourself. What's too scary for you as well? Two different things.
They are kind of two different things, but I suppose there is overlap, because I wouldn't write something that I felt was just too bad to put in one of my books, for me to read as a reader as well. But I don't think I really draw the line with scariness. I think if you go into a horror film or a book, you tend to be somebody who's looking to be scared. You know, you're riding that roller coaster because you want that thrill. I think I draw the line at traumatizing my readers. That's what I don't want to do. So if I'm writing something that's truly disturbing, talking about, things like child abuse, that's where I feel like maybe you have to tread very, very carefully, especially in horror, because you're not, heading towards a good outcome. Let's say that.
Yeah.
So,
no, definitely. I think child abuse is is quite a trigger for a lot of people, and it's one thing to scare people, and it's another thing to, like you say, to traumatize them, to put them through something that could happen in the real world. And and what do you think the difference is between writing horror for young adults and writing horror for adults? Is there one?
I think, again, it ties in with that idea of, what you might put in that would be traumatizing for somebody. And I think in adult, that line doesn't really exist in adult horror. I've read some quite things that I definitely wouldn't have put into a YA, and I wouldn't expect to see in a YA. Yeah, anything that is a little bit too like grim and traumatizing, you can put that into adult horror, but it's not where you want to go. If you're just looking for a fun, scary, spooky thrill ride, you don't want that.
I think as well, with the young adult audiences are less tolerant of certain tropes as well, with sort of the classic woman in a girl body of a girl in a short skirt kind of tropes, that they're much more sensitive to that kind of thing as well, aren't they? Whereas adult readers are used to the tropes, desensitized maybe.
I think so. I mean, it's not even in terms of like violence in YA. You can, I mean, as you know, you've written a scene where somebody is murdered on screen. So
on screen, it's not much blood, but there's a big knife, and it's in the first scene.
So violence, like
on TikTok.
I know, and like in books like The Hunger Games, those are incredibly violent books, but it doesn't seem that there is that much of a line in terms of what you can put in YA in violence. Other things there are, though. I mean,
definitely.
How sexually graphic something is, that's something that definitely differentiates between YA and adult, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. So Wicked Little Deeds, it's super twisty. There's loads of surprises along the way. What do you think is the key to a really good twist?
As a reader, I hate it when I'm reading a book if there is a twist that in hindsight I couldn't have guessed. I hate it if there are no clues. There's no, nothing indicating that this is coming up. Don't like it, feel cheated. So I make sure that I don't do that with mine. I love a good twist. If it catches you by surprise, but then in hindsight you're like, oh yeah, those were the signs, I can pick up on those on a second read or just looking back through the book. I like to see that as a reader, and that's what I try to include with mine. I think pretty much every book that I've written so far has had some kind of a twist to one degree or another.
The favorite, it's basically a good twist, kind of makes you go, but then you go, oh yeah,
exactly.
And then that's why you did that thing back in chapter 4, and that's it. Kind of then clicking happens, and it's not as easy to do as people think.
I love doing that though. In writing things, sometimes I won't know what the twist is going to be before I get there, but then you have to go back and think, okay, this is a point where I could hint at that's coming up. So I like seeding in those little tiny tidbits of information that a reader who is looking for them is going to pick up on these clues. I like that.
So it's kind of dastardly fun. And also, like, do you have a problem with people figuring out your twists? Because I don't. I think, yay, good for you.
Same as you. I don't have a problem with people figuring out. I hope that you'll still enjoy it, and you'll enjoy it perhaps even more because you did figure it out. I think if you get it too soon, that can kill the enjoyment. But if you figure it out just before the main character does, I think as a reader, that kind of makes you feel, I was reading that cleverly. I'm quite pleased with myself there.
Satisfying. Very much so. Have you got like what's the favourite twisty book or film or whatever that you could recommend?
Well, I one of the books/films that inspired Harrow Lake was Rebecca, particularly the Alfred Hitchcock version. I love the twist that comes at the end of that. I think, it's the whole story is just swept me away, and I like that the book has a slightly different twist to the one that's in the film. So yeah, it's well worth a read or a watch.
Or both, yeah.
Definitely,
yeah. No, I quite like the one in Fingersmith because I really did not see that coming. I obviously can't say anything about it, but it was just really, and again, it was one of those things like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and it had a lot of, there was some explanation afterwards, but yeah, it just made perfect sense. So if you were a Kat Ellis fan and you were looking to find more creepy stuff, what books and TV and movies would you recommend?
Gosh, there's so many. I mean, if you're looking for the kind of more horror, scary, creepy aspect of my books, I would look at Catherine Foxfield's books. She has a new one coming out called Tag You're It. I haven't read it yet, but her other two so far have been brilliant. And I think Catherine Foxfield's books very much have like a similar vibe to Wicked Little Deeds. If you like your horror a bit more gothic, think Dawn Kurtigich's book. Also, Cynthia Murphy's Last One to Die was a really cool one with like a historical aspect to it. If you like your thrillers more on the sort of mystery side with less horror, then I think nobody can go wrong with an Andreina Cordani book. So definitely pick those up.
Fantastic. That's what I like to hear. So if you could pick, because you write supernatural horrors or thrillers. I've not seen a rom-com so far. Just point me to one if you've done one. But what would you choose if you could choose either genre?
Gosh, that's a tricky one. I mean, I've written 5 books, and they all sort of fall loosely under the banner of thriller. The most recent 2, obviously horror thriller. Before that, my debut was kind of like a fantasy magical realism type thriller. And then I had a romantic suspense, would you believe? And then I had a sci-fi thriller.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So yeah, I've written across a few different sort of subgenres. I think if I could only pick one, it would be horror. I think because I just tend to gravitate towards it so strongly in both what I read, watch, and write. So yeah, I couldn't break loose of that one, I don't think.
So if you tried to write a rom-com, would there end up being some kind of grisly murder or haunted spirit or something?
It wasn't strictly a rom-com, but I did this like online contest a few years back now, where you were assigned a genre to write a short story in, and I was assigned women's fiction, which is not something that I've ever written before, but I really quite enjoyed it when I was writing it. Yeah, it was a fun thing to do.
Women's fiction, even if you wanted to.
Yeah, I like stretching the muscles with writing, so I can't say I would ever rule out writing a particular genre. I'm probably not going to write a rom-com because I'm not funny enough, I don't think, to do that. But all other bets are off.
In your TikTok, they're funny. Yeah. So what's next for you? What are you working on at the moment?
I'm working on a couple of things at the moment. So I have one manuscript that I've finished that I'm not allowed to say anything about, other than it's kind of, if you liked Wicked Little Deeds and Harrow Lake and want something that's scarier still than those, then keep an eye out for it. Aside from those, I'm working on yet another YA horror thriller and a YA fantasy, because why not?
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, just take on some more. You're very productive.
Spread my wings.
So what's your ambition? What would you like to tick off your author bucket list?
I would really, really love to see like a special like subscription box edition of one of my books. I think that's on my bucket list to see that.
That'd be nice.
Or, you know, like
Yeah.
the Folio Society
Legends.
do those gorgeous like hardcover editions of certain books. That would be like absolute gold for me.
Just jitters on here or something, or the equivalent.
Yeah, just his hand, like reaching out. That would be nice. Other than that, obviously the one that I think pretty much all authors would like is to see their book turned into either a film or TV series. So yeah. That's on the bucket list.
Yeah, definitely. Netflix people, get on it, frankly. Definitely. Brilliant. So yeah, it's been really lovely to talk to you anyway. Yeah, I feel like I've learned lots of great writing tips.
Thank you very much.
So thank you so much. It's been lovely to kick off, well, certainly my experience of YA ThrillerCon with you, and hoping to see what you've got next very, very soon. Please, can I have
Thank you very much.
Thanks very